back with my November wrap up because today is December the 1st and I love Christmas, so I'm very happy. But before we start with our Christmas celebrating, I would like to tell you about the books that I read in November. Actually, right now I'm carrying a very heavy book in my hands, and that is this gigantic piece of work. This is Harry Potter from page to screen. It is a library book, it's not my own. And when I found it in the library, I was so shocked because I had no idea it would be this huge and this heavy, and I had to carry it with me home from the library. Basically, this is a book that shows you how they turned the books into movies, and it has a lot of stunning pictures, as you can see, and it has a lot of background information on the characters, the setting, the dresses, etc. And I have been skimming through this book throughout November. I haven't read it. I read like small passages of the text and I enjoyed the pictures, and that's all. I just wanted to include this in this wrap up. And now that that book is out of the way, let me just continue with the books I actually read. The first book I picked up in November is The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. I really appreciated the writing style in this novel. It is absolutely stunning and beautiful. That is what really interested me in this book from the very first page. I really enjoyed it, and it is one of a kind. The story in itself was also interesting, but it didn't really grab my attention that much. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. It is basically about a woman who is being married to a man. She then goes to live in his household, and she quickly realizes that this man is always out of town. And then she receives a dollhouse from her husband, which consists of miniatures, and these miniatures turn out to actually reflect her life and what will happen in her life. So it was interesting, but I ended up giving it 3 stars. Next I picked up Tatiana and Alexander by Paulina Simons, the second book in the series over here, the Bronze Horseman series. This is a book that is perfect for reading when it is cold and dark outside, and I think that's why I was in the mood for it. I really love this series. This book was one of a kind as well. I actually ended up giving it 5 stars. Even though it has its flaws, I still really enjoyed it. I was so emotionally captivated throughout the entire story. There is something about their relationship. It grabs me and I feel it through the pages. And I'm not going to go too much into the story, but look up The Bronze Horseman and read the synopsis, because I really cannot recommend this series enough. In November I also picked up The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This was a book that I had to read for work, and I'm not that much into fantasy, so I did enjoy the story. I knew it already, but I had never read it. And I ended up giving it 3 stars because, as I said, I enjoyed the story, but to me, adventure books always turn into these kind of weird stories, because you always have to have a main character who goes out on an adventure and things happen to him. And to me, it feels like these things happen way too quickly and too many things happen. So it's like the things happen because it has to happen, it has to be an adventure, and I don't like these kind of stories. So 3 stars because I absolutely love Gandalf. He was the person who saved it for me, and I loved the opening scene, the scene with the Hobbit house and all the unexpected guests. I loved it. In November I read 4 classics, and I actually didn't realize until now that I had read that many, but I did. And the first one is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and I was reconvinced that this is my favorite classic of all time. It's been about 5 years since I last read it, and back then I loved it. It was just such a beautiful story to me, and I was interested to see if I would still like it today, being an adult and all these things. And I did. This is such a beautiful journey that we go on. We follow Jane Eyre, who is this ugly woman, but she has this beautiful heart. The next classic I read is also perfect for November month, I think, and that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. This was a reread to me as well. However, I quickly realized that I had basically forgotten all of the books since I last read it. So this was kind of a rediscovering of a book for me, if that makes sense. This was by the way, Jane Eyre I gave 5 stars. This book I gave 4 stars. It was a beautiful story. It was a scary story and a mysterious story, and it was really good, but it wasn't on the level of Jane Eyre. So 4 stars for me. I like the cover, I like the color, and as I said, you have to read this book in the wintry months. Next is Middlemarch by George Eliot, and I already did a video review of this book, so I'm not going to say too much else other than I really liked it and I gave it 4 stars. And the last classic I read in November is Persuasion by Jane Eyre. This was also a reread for me. However, once again, this was one of those books that I had completely forgotten. And to be honest, I don't think I quite understood it the first time I read it, so that's why I couldn't remember it. This time I completely understood it, I fell in love with it. This is a beautiful love story. I struggled with getting through it because I felt so sorry for the main character, Anne, I think that's her name, and I just, so I highly enjoyed it. I keep saying that, but I just love these classics. They are amazing, and I gave it 4 stars. I read so many books in November. I also read The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. This is an interesting story. It has an interesting premise because we have a story within a story. And the thing is, the first story that we hear about, the main story, was my favorite. I loved that one. I just really enjoyed it. And then the framed story, the story within the story, was okay as well, but that's when things started getting confusing to me. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. Basically, this deals with a woman who receives a letter from a famous author. This author wants to tell her tale of her life, and she wants for this woman to write down her tale and publish it, maybe. And this is supposed to be the 13th tale, because during the author's life she has told several tales, but they have all been lies. But she is now ready to tell the truth. Very interesting premise. The main character loves books, she loves reading. I loved her because of that, so yeah. The next 3 books are books that I read during the 24 and 48 readathon. So I have already done a video on that readathon and on my wrap-ups, so I'm just quickly going to show you the books. I read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. An interesting, funny read. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read Paper Towns by John Green. This was a reread for me. I didn't really think it was suited for rereading, but I ended up giving it 3 stars anyway. Then we have Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. It's a very dark book, I would say. A really interesting book, and I gave it 3 stars. I think I have 2 more books to show you, and then we are done. I also read my first Nancy Mitford novel in November, and that is the first one in this compilation of all her novels. It is called Highland Fling. I had no idea what I was going into because I bought this book on a whim. I thought it was pretty, I wanted to read something by Nancy Mitford, and I found it for cheap. So I have it now in my hands, and I am so happy that I loved the first novel. It was so much fun, and I love how Nancy Mitford uses caricatures in her writing. It was so much fun to read, and the best thing about this book is that I'm not going to rate it, because I'm going to read all of her novels and then rate all of her novels as one binder. So it was such a joy to just read it without having to think about rating. And the last book I read in November is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is a book that follows 2 main characters during the Second World War. And the girl is blind and the boy is a soldier. I had high expectations for this book because a lot of people have told me it is amazing, but I was all in all quite disappointed with it. I mean, the writing style was confusing. Sometimes I found the most beautiful sentences and metaphors, and that was mixed together with very staccato-like writing. I didn't like that. I felt like it was way too abrupt. The chapters were way too short for my taste, and I do realize that's part of the story. You are supposed to have this messy kind of frame in your mind when you read this book, because the story is messy, but it didn't appeal to me, and I was confused by it. The story in itself was beautiful. I would have to say I liked the girl's point of view more than the boys. And that means all in all I gave this book 3 stars. That is it for my November wrap up. I will be doing a December to be read. Even though I don't normally do separate to be read videos, I will do that for December because I have some interesting Christmas-like book that I want to read in December. So look out for that video. And until then, have a great day everyone. Happy reading and bye bye.